Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. This is the second Google Hangout that I'm doing today on the gift economy, specifically on problems and pitfalls. Um, there's a lot of these that I want to talk about, so I'm breaking this into at least more than one part. Today will be part one. I'm going to do my best to keep things as concise and as efficient as possible. I have this little book with lots of notes in it, so if you've heard me speak before or know me in person, you know I can ramble on a bit. So I'm going to really try and stick to script. Keep this short and tight, and hopefully helpful and purposeful for you. So a little background again. If this is the first one you're listening to, the first Google Hangout that I did on the gift economy is on my website or on my YouTube channel, and there I talk a little bit about my background professionally before I started working this way. I think that's relevant, particularly if you're curious, what my business acumen or experience might be. So I do talk about that there. So I encourage you, if you're curious, to check that out. I'm not going to go into all of that today. Today, what I want to talk about specifically are problems and pitfalls, and of those, risk, how to mitigate risk, what the biggest risks are, and why they're fear-based, and how to deal with them. Cash flow, how to keep the lights on, how to manage a business when you're working in the gift, and then planning, how to look into the black hole that is the future and is possibly even blacker and harder to read when you're in the gift economy versus a traditional economy. So with that said, I'm going to get into it. One last little bit of housekeeping. I try and talk about the products that I use for these different things, and I use a lot of different third-party products that I pay for or use for free. I mention these only in the hope that it might be helpful for you if you're curious what tools you might want to experiment with. I am not paid or have any relationship with any of these businesses at all. I don't use any affiliate links on my site unless it's really well marked. So I'm just throwing out the products that I use, again, hoping they might be useful or purposeful for you. But there's no business relationship there between me and those companies, either direct or implied at all. So let's get started. We talk about risk. How do you manage risk, and what is the risk in working in a gift economy specifically? For me, from the get-go, it was always the fear that someone would take advantage of me, that someone would be willing to take my gifts and not willing to gift me anything back, and even worse, would purposefully seek me out to use my gifts, full well expecting that they were never going to gift me back anything, in an effort to take my gifts for free as just a direct benefit for them. I can say before I get into this that has never happened to me, not even one time, but it's still a real fear, and it's still a risk that I believe you have to manage, and here are some of the ways that I do that. Last Hangout, I talked a little bit about a quote from Charles Eisenstein. I'm going to paraphrase it again because I think it's relevant here, and that's if you give a great gift to somebody and there is no gratitude given in return, then it's likely a sign you've given the gift to the wrong person. Again, it's not a direct quote, but it's pretty close. The idea that if you give a gift to somebody and nothing happens in return for you is really your responsibility, is what I take from that quote, that you've given your gift to the wrong person. And then for me, the logical next thought is, did you do everything possible to determine if that was the right person in the first place before you went ahead and spent your time and money and resources and anything else you need to do to create your gift? So how do you mitigate that? It really comes back to, ultimately, everything in the gift economy comes back to trust. And when you are seeking out a new client, trying to establish who you're going to share that trust with is the key. When I first started, everything that I did was either a relationship with somebody that I already knew, or with a referral from somebody that I knew and knew well, and that was the easiest way for me to mitigate risk right out of the gate, and I recommend that. Some of the things that I do are very specific to my industry. Um, Risk for me is pretty significant in that for me to create a gift in what I do, it can take anywhere from 20 to 30 to even 60 hours worth of my work and time. And giving that gift to the wrong person not only means that I've spent that time in the wrong way, but even more so, that's time that I could have spent helping somebody else. So the ultimate goal for me is to help as many people as I can, and if I'm giving gifts to the wrong people, that really hurts the whole process. So again, starting out, it was easiest for me to take a look at who I knew, and when I took on a client, it was somebody that I knew well or was referred to me by somebody that I knew well. But that's not really a sustainable plan for growth. No matter how many friends you have, you're going to run out of opportunities that way. So you have to be able to take on some additional risk. Little side note that I wanted to include in the beginning of this, and sorry to back up here, but before I began this morning, the city of Philadelphia showed up outside my house to start digging up the street and the sidewalk to make repairs, I guess, from the winter that we had. So if there's background noises like jackhammers and stuff, I apologize for that. I really wasn't expecting that or have a backup plan. So again, when I first started, those are the people that I worked with, but then to expand, you definitely need some strategies and tools. For me, in what I do, it's very important that I have an interview process with every particular or every possible prospect that comes along. The interview process can be either over the phone or in person, but either way, it's important that I sit down, I spend some time, generally about 30 minutes to an hour, discussing with the client not only what they need, but also where they're coming from with regard to working this way. I have a lot of experience in working with people in a business environment, and I have, I believe, fairly good instincts. I get a lot out of that interview process. What I really want to determine is two parts. Identify every possible thing that the client needs me to do for them, but also identify why they want to work with me. You can really get a lot of exposure to the client's motives by talking about that second issue. Why are you interested in working in the gift? Sometimes it's very apparent. Sometimes people reach out to you, or at least to me specifically, because I am working in the gift, and it's really important that they have a business relationship that way, and that's great. Sometimes I've been a little more skeptical if it's been a more traditional or established business that I know generally operates in a traditional economy, and then wants to work with me in the gift. I might explore that a little bit more. But again, I've never had a problem with clients once I've taken on the work. The interview process is really my first way to determine if that's somebody that I want to work with. The next thing that I do, and I think this is the most important step of all, is creating a proposal. And the proposal for me is a really detailed document that I create. It's about 7 to 8 pages long, and it covers a lot of things. Now, when you're building a website, there's a lot of information that you need from the client. The way our workflow is, sometimes I'm sending proposals out to clients for projects we're not going to be able to get started on for another month or so. So I try and collect as much information as I can. But basically, inside of the proposal is a detailed list of everything the client needs me to do and how long it will take me to do it. But I also include a lot of information about the people that work with me, a lot of information about working in the gift, a lot of information about what that time might be worth in a traditional economy, and then specifically when I think we can get started and when we can get finished. I think it's important to put as much information up front in the business relationship with the client to give them as much information about how you work, how long it will take, any variable that comes into you creating your gift, particularly if you're in a business where you're creating custom gifts like I am. I don't have an inventory of websites that I hand out to people. I have an inventory of time. So I put a lot of information in that proposal, and then that gives me kind of two tools. One, it gives me a roadmap when we do get started on the project that I can go back to and refer, and I can go back to the list, and particularly if there's a time gap between the proposal when we get started, which again right now is often about a month. The proposal is the starting point for me and the team to kind of dig into the project and see what we have to do. The other thing it does is give the client 100% visibility and transparency into what is required for me to create the gift. So when that proposal goes out, there is sort of a decision point for the client to make. They're not required to gift me any sort of deposit or really do anything on their end, except I do require that they read it and that they approve it. And my hope is that by them digging into the proposal and making themselves familiar with all of that information, not just how long it's going to take me or suggestions on how to value the work, but the entire process, that it will eliminate any questions, and it will also serve as sort of a last stop for somebody who's not really sure they want to work this way to back out of their relationship. So the proposal for me is really key. It's sort of the last stop before we dive into everything. I was making proposals by hand, and now I use proposal software. I've gone back and forth on this. The more activity you have in your business, I can't recommend using proposal software enough. Right now I'm using a company called Quote Roller, and they have a lot of different price plans. I've also used Quote Robot and Proposable, and I think a couple other ones I've experimented with. The advantage to using proposal software is tracking and reporting. And also, when I have a 7 to 8 page proposal, a lot of it is static information or the same information that I want to give to every client. So using proposal software stores that and allows me to just load in the unique information for that particular project. It also gives me some visibility when a client has read the proposal and gives me a platform to see if they approve it or accept it. Finally, and we'll get into this in one of the next parts, it gives me a lot of reporting and statistics as far as how many proposals that I've sent out, when they get read, how often they get read, and when they're approved and what percentage are approved. And all of that's really important to make sure that you're running your business in a sustainable way. So those are kind of the main tools that I use. Again, when we're talking about risk, in every project that you take on, it really comes down to how you look at it yourself. You can either be taking on a lot of risk or taking on a lot of trust. I don't want to work with anybody that I have a bad instinct about. I don't want to work with any industry that I'm not comfortable with. Working in the gift does not mean you have to work with everybody that comes along, particularly depending on how you create your gift. And for me, it's very time intensive. I am very selective about the clients that I work with, and it's up to you to choose who you want to work with. And I don't feel like you even have to be transparent about your decision-making process for choosing which clients you want to take on. But at the end of the day, you should be in a frame of mind where with every project you're taking on, it's an increase of trust in your life, not an increase of risk. This was a really difficult thing for me to sort of get to in the first year that I was doing this. I looked at every project as an increase in risk. Here I am putting out another 30 hours, here's another 40 hours. What if all these negative things happen? I really believe you have to clear that out of your head and get to a point where if you're going to enter a relationship with a client, you make yourself and the client go through enough steps up front to make sure that it's a good match. The interview process and the proposal is what works for me, so that when you take on the project, again, you're adding trust into your life, not adding risk into your life. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is how to keep the lights on, how to manage your business, and particularly this comes down to cash flow. Again, a very traditional economy term, but it is applicable, and I'm going to use it because it makes sense to talk about this particular issue. So when we talk about cash flow, what we're talking about is not the revenue or gifts that come in for your business. It's the amount of liquid cash, if you will, that you have available to you on a day-to-day basis to cover your expenses. So what does that mean? For me, if I take on a project and the client ends up gifting me back with cash, that's great. It's as good as anything else, and I use that cash to effectively keep the lights on, to keep running the business. But when I look at my process, it's generally a 6-week window from when I start a project to when it's finished, and then it could be any length of time from the time it's finished to infinity for a client to gift me back. So when you look at cash flow and you look at the cash on hand on a day-to-day basis to cover your expenses, it's kind of a difficult thing to do. This is why in a traditional economy, particularly in the web design industry, a lot of people will require deposits and things of that nature, because it's sort of, if you think about that 6-week plus window as a peak and a valley, or as people say, feast or famine. There's gifts that come in and cash that comes in, and then there's a dry spell when you're working. So deposits can help that, but I don't believe in requiring deposits or anything like that. It's something that I suggest to my clients. If they would like to offer a good faith deposit, they're more than welcome, and I have tools set up for them to do that. And every time a client does, it helps. But it's definitely not required, and I don't want it to get in the way of the gift relationship. But coming back into how to run a business, how do you keep the lights on when your cash flow is so peaked and valleyed? There's a couple of things that I do. Right off the bat, I can't stress enough the need to be as lean as possible when you're establishing your business and the tools you want to work with. It's good advice for any business, but I think it's particularly good advice when you're working in the gift economy. You're not creating a business for show. I don't think that a gift economy needs to support, maybe these are personal views, but I don't think that a gift economy business needs to support flashy offices, any type of showy or expensive business tools or trappings or anything like that. I think it's important as possible to keep everything as lean as you can, use as many free services as you can, use as many collaborative services. There's a lot of tools out there, and we'll talk about some. But I think when you're looking at running a business in the gift, when you're specifically looking at keeping the lights on in a business supported solely by gifts that people or clients gift to you, I think there's a responsibility there to be almost as frugal as possible with how you run the business using those gifts that are given to you. So I try and keep things as lean as I can, and I highly recommend that that's your first step. The next thing that I do and I think is essential is keeping a budget. And you need to budget 2 parts of your life when you're working in the gift, at least. One part is the costs that are required to keep the lights on for your business, and when I use that expression, keep the lights on, I mean keep the business going, so that tomorrow and next week you can meet new people and take on new clients. So that's one thing you need to budget. The other part you need to budget are the costs of your day-to-day life. Food, rent, mortgage, car payments, things like that. I think you really need to have a clear picture of both of those things. What do you need on a monthly basis to run your business? What do you need on a monthly basis to sustain your life? Cash-wise, specifically, because again, it's still the world that we're sort of stuck in. And as things go on, you can look at ways to reduce the cash needs. But out of the gate, for me, I have quite a bit to run a web design shop. There are hosting fees. There are fees that I need to pay for domain names. There are software that I have monthly expenses for. There's software that I have annual expenses for. These are all things, not even getting into internet access for my house, phones for the business, wireless phones, everything that I need to effectively run things on a day-to-day basis. Most of those things have a traditional economy price tag. So knowing what that number is on a monthly basis, is it $300? Is it $500? Is it $1,000? Whatever your monthly number is to keep the lights on, you really have to know that. You have to be very intimate with that. You have to have that probably down on a spreadsheet or inside of some software that you can look at and say, okay, each month to keep the lights on, this is the amount that I need. In addition, the other part then is what do you need to run your life? What do you need for your expenses as far as your mortgage and your house and things like that? Again, as things evolve, maybe some of those things move away from a traditional economy, and I think that would be wonderful. But while we're still stuck here, you have to account for that as well. So when you look at both of those costs, then what happens next? For me, I believe that you need to pay the business first. You need to look at the costs you have to keep the lights on, whatever that number is, and you need to make sure that that is existing in a bank account or a PayPal account or whatever you're using to pay all of those traditional economy bills. That amount of money needs to be set aside. And if you're gifted anything from a client, that's cash, you need to pay attention to that costs that are coming up and pay the business first. Put that money into an account that you have ready to pay those bills. Because if you don't, for me, if anything shuts down, then the whole thing unravels. If I can't pay for my hosting each month, then all of the clients that have websites with me won't have websites anymore. Referrals and things like that I'll talk about will disappear because I need to be able to tell clients that their website will be up 100% or as close to that as I can. There are natural issues that affect any website, but it can't be because your web host didn't pay his bill. So you need to identify that and set that money aside. Ideally, I look at keeping what I call a slush fund, or identifying the cost for running your business, identifying the cost for keeping the lights on, and carrying it out to about 3 months worth. So that's a number right there. So if it's $500 a month to keep the lights on, then my goal is to have $1,500 sitting in a bank account to run the business at all times. There are variables that come up. There are things that pop into your life and pop into your business, and for your own peace of mind, even aside from it's a good business practice, but for your own peace of mind to know that you can keep the lights on for an extended period of time, I highly recommend identifying your monthly cost number, multiplying it by at least 3, and putting that amount into a bank account so that it's automatic, so that you don't have that fear, you don't have that stress. We talked about stress and how disruptive working in a gift economy can be in my previous hangout. One of the best ways to mitigate that is to have those funds in an account so that you can keep the lights on. The last part of that is sort of ties into the first thing I said in keeping things lean. It's also choosing your vendors wisely. The vendors being the software companies for me, or the services that you're going to add to your monthly costs with. So if you're looking at $500 in monthly costs or $5,000, whatever it may be, every vendor that you bring on, every business relationship that you bring on that's going to add to that, you need to be very, very particular about. You need to put a lot of care into that and make sure that it's an expense that you need to have and that it's the best possible use of the gifts that are given to you to take on that expense. A lot of people have asked me before, how do I choose which vendors I want to use? There aren't a lot of people who can support me in what I need that are also working in a gift economy. As far as web hosts go and wireless phone providers and internet access providers, we're not quite there yet, that I can choose from a collection of alternate economy, progressive thinking corporations. So for the most part, that variable is not there. So for me, I have a 2-part decision-making process when I'm bringing on a new vendor, and that's A, has the vendor done anything evil from my own moral filter? And by that I mean, does the vendor participate in activities that really go against my own personal moral compass? And that's a variable for you to decide. And it's not saying that the vendor does everything right, but it is saying, have they done anything significantly wrong? Maybe that's a rationalization, but it's really the best that I can do at this point until we get, a lot more services offered by people who are more in line with the way that I want to live. So for the most part, it's, have they done anything really terrible or evil or wrong? I'm not going to get into bashing some clients or some vendors that are out there, sorry, but there are vendors that do actively. There are service providers, there are domain registrars and web host companies that do actively participate in activities that are really against the way that I want to live. So I exclude those from the mix. The second part that I think is really important is only bringing on clients and vendors that can really make my particular client's experience as best as possible. So when I look at a web host, for instance, it's probably one of my biggest expenses. Again, I'm looking at has this company done anything really terrible, and if they haven't, then I look at how well will this company support me to support my clients. I need a web host that doesn't go down. I need a web host that is very supportive when there is an issue, because there's always issues that come up, particularly in my industry. So I need somebody that I can trust, so that I can ask my clients to trust me in that particular issue as well. Not to get into a list of all the vendors that I use, but I use Site5 for my web hosting, and I use Namecheap.com as my domain registrar. I find them both to be not only economically sound, but they're companies that I haven't uncovered anything really challenging about things that they've done in the past business-wise. They're also extremely good at what they do, and they're, for me, extremely supportive when I do have issues. So whatever your industry is, really spend the time to dig into the clients that you're going to bring on. Build a spreadsheet that looks at your monthly costs to keep the lights on, and when you add to that spreadsheet, when you add clients or vendors or anybody that's going to add increased cost to that sheet, do it with a lot of thought, and do it with a lot of care, and do it with a lot of purpose, because again, that spreadsheet is going to represent not only your monthly cost, but it's going to represent how you distribute the gifts that are given to you by other people. And I think there's sort of a moral responsibility there as well, that if somebody's going to gift you, say, with cash, and you're going to use that cash to pay your monthly bills for your business, that the bills you're paying are aligned with what you perceive to be something that your client would find value in as well. It's not always that easy, but I think it's something that is worth some of your time. To keep track of expenses and bills, I mentioned in the last Hangout that I use FreshBooks for accounting software. It's very similar in a lot of ways to QuickBooks if you've used that in the past. It's cloud-based, so you don't have any software on your computer. I find it works really well for me, both for managing expenses as well as managing gifts that come in from clients. There are other built into it, like time tracking and things like that can be really helpful as well. You have to, well, we'll talk about this in a moment, but you really have to know what it costs you to build your gift, both in resources and costs from the spreadsheet that I mentioned, but also in your own time that's spent doing it. And FreshBooks is great for that. There are some other software that's out there. Harvest is another brand that you might want to check out. It's more aligned on the time tracking side. There's a lot more that are out there as well. Those are two that I've used myself. What I like about FreshBooks is, one of the main things I like about Quote Roller as well, is that they integrate well with each other. I can take a proposal from Quote Roller and press a button, and it creates a project and an account in FreshBooks automatically. So it saves me some time, adds some efficiency and time that I can better spend working on projects. So all of that sort of has to factor into everything. But when you're looking at how do you keep the lights on, a lot of it is your own personal knowledge and what is required to do that, and being very careful about adding things to that list, and then making sure that you have enough set aside to kind of continue over the peaks and valleys that exist in any business, but are really, really profound when you're working in the gift. So that sort of segues into the third part that I wanted to discuss today, and that's how do you plan for the future. Planning is hard in any business, and it's never an exact science. In every business that I've worked in, traditionally, there's always an effort to to create budgets, to create plans, to create forecasts, whatever your company likes to call it, that will project what will happen over the next 6, 9, 12 months, or even beyond. Even from my way former life, when I was in the Army, there was always constantly training and planning meetings that look at 30 days out, 60 days out, 90 days out. Every organization wants to know what's happening in the future as best they can. There's no 100% way to do it, but it's important that you go through the process and get as close as you can. And every organization will have its own little things that it picks up along the way to make that projection be a little more efficient and a little clearer. So that's fine. When you look at it in a gift economy, in my opinion, this is one of the biggest problems or pitfalls. Is it's really a challenge to say what's going to happen 60, 90, or 120 days out, or even worse, 12 months down the road, because everything is so fluid. Everything is based on trust. Everything is based on you creating a gift for a client, and then trusting that in some way, shape, or form things will happen that will allow you to keep the lights on and keep helping other clients. Whether those are cash gifts or gifts in kind or whatever it is, the variables are so much that when you look at projecting and saying, so what is this business going to look like 6 months from now or 12 months from now, it's definitely a lot more challenging. But there are a couple of things that I think you can do to help. One of the things, and this is near and dear to my past business working life as well, is using a sales funnel or a sales cycle, or appreciating the fact that needs to exist. Again, we're working in the gift, and there's a lot of really amazing and awesome relationship and feelings that come from working this way. But it doesn't mean that traditional business tools aren't applicable or even helpful for you to keep the business going. So when I talk about things like a sales cycle or customers or clients, sometimes it seems to run against what your instincts are about working in the gift, and that's fine. I totally get that. It does for me as well. But at the same time, these are the helpful tools that allow me to keep the business going, and I'm going to continue to use those terms because they're the clearest and most direct way to talk about things. So when we talk about a sales funnel or a sales cycle, it's really talking about the process from when you very first meet somebody or even have an idea in your head that this person might benefit from your gift, all the way through the process to when you've given them your gift and they have gifted you back however they feel is the right gift for them to give back to you. So there's a process there from when you first pop into your head that this organization or this business might be somebody who can benefit from you to when that organization or business has gifted you back. Mapping out or charting that cycle, I think, is a really important process for you to run your business as efficiently as you can. In my world, it was always called a sales funnel or a sales cycle. Funnel is used because if you look at the image of a funnel that's wider at the top where things are poured into, and then narrows down and narrows down and narrows down until at the very bottom it is dripping out, the final essence of whatever you've poured in. If you think about the sales cycle that way, a funnel at the top is where you're pouring in every possible person who might benefit from your gift, and then as your relationship with them progresses, they're moving sort of down the funnel. They get narrower and narrower and narrower. People who you thought might be people who could benefit from your gift turn out that they're not, so they kind of drop off, and what's left, what's distilled from the bottom, is the client that you have this relationship with, who you've given a gift to, and who has gifted you back in some way, shape or form. So mapping out that process in stages is what a sales cycle or sales funnel can do, and there's software that will allow you to do that. Most of the software that does this falls under the umbrella name of a CRM or a customer relationship management software. Salesforce was one of the first ones on the market with a cloud-based project or a cloud-based software to do it. Sage makes some projects. Oracle makes some software to do it as well. Now there's a ton. There's open source stuff that's out there. There's stuff you can build into your own website. There are all kinds of solutions. I use a product called Base CRM. I think they're based out of the UK. Really, for me, it came down to a couple of things. Aesthetically, it really appealed to me the way it was laid out, and integration-wise, it also communicates with the other software that I use. So it integrates directly with Quote Roller, and it integrates directly with Basecamp, and also with FreshBooks for accounting. So inside of Base CRM, anybody that I have an idea that might use my gift goes in as a lead, and when I start to communicate with them, they progress to a prospect. When I have a phone call with them, that's another stage. When I write a proposal for them, that moves them along to another stage. When they accept the proposal, that moves them along to another stage. When we start the project, when we finish, when I send out a final accounting of how much time we spent, and when they send whatever type of gift they send back is another stage as well. So each of those stages, we manually move that project account from stage to stage. Using a CRM for this has a lot of benefits to it. Primarily, it will keep track of how many people you move from one stage to the next, what the frequency is, what the percentage is, and so on. Those types of reports are really key. You really have to know your numbers. You have to know your numbers for your prospects and clients. You have to know how many leads do I need to put in the top of the funnel to result in a client at the bottom of the funnel. And in every business that I've worked in, there are a lot of numbers that seem to carry through across the board, no matter what the industry is. And traditionally, for me, roughly, we'll talk really rough here, but about 100 prospects would result in maybe 50, whatever stage you want to put it in. About 100 prospects could result in about 50 people that I'm actually having a phone call or an interview process with. Of that 50 that I'm having the interview process with, maybe 30 to 40 at the end of the call require or want a proposal. Of those that I send a proposal out to, maybe 10 to 20 actually accept the proposal, and it's something that they want to move forward with. And then from there, there's always somewhat of a drop-off from people that accept the proposal but don't quite make it to the finish line for a number of reasons. Either you cancel the project along the way, or they do, or however it works. Those numbers are going to be unique for your industry. They're going to be unique for every industry, but the fact is that they exist for every industry, and it's really up to you to collect as much data as you can so that you can know that, because knowing those numbers is the key to doing any type of planning in the future. You need to know if 100 prospects at the top of the funnel will result in 10 clients at the end of the funnel, then you need to know how many prospects you need to keep loading into the top of the funnel. If you have 10 clients right now and you want 10 clients next month, then you need to make sure you have 100 prospects in the top of the funnel for those 10 clients to appear from, and each month that needs to repeat. So you have to know what that number is right off the bat before you can do any type of planning to know how many prospects do I need to load into the top of the funnel here. The key, as I think you can see, is the prospect, or the lead, or however you want to call the person who is really an idea that you've had that they may benefit from your gift. Identifying them and reaching out to them and making contact with them to put them into the funnel is the key to keeping all the wheels moving down the road. You have to keep the funnel full at the top at all times. You always have to be finding ways to keep people moving into the sales cycle. So once it's full, or how do you keep it full? Or if it's not full, what can you do to find more prospects, and so on. So for every industry that's out there, and the other piece that you need to know is what your perfect client looks like. That person who comes out at the bottom of the funnel and you've had a tremendous relationship with, you've given them your gift, they've gifted you back in a way that is very supportive of you. You loved working with them, they loved working with you. You're both referring each other back and forth, and it's this wonderful, trust-based, mutually supportive relationship. What does that client look like? in your head as best as you can. And I'm not suggesting that you limit or label or sort of, try and typecast anyone, but I am suggesting that you identify, at least in your mind, what that relationship looks like and what that client looks like who most likely is going to fall into that type of relationship. Because that's your starting point. When you then can identify that person, and maybe it's based on geography, maybe it's based on demographics, maybe it's based on age or academic level or whatever the variables are. You need to kind of go through that process and say, okay, this is what my ideal prospect or my ideal client looks like. And when you identify them, then that gives you a place to start to identify the prospects that you need to kind of bring into your sales funnel. So from there, you want to look at, once you identify what your perfect client is, you can come back and say, okay, I want to find more of that type of person or that type of organization. For me, and for anybody working in the gift, finding people that are open to working in the gift is a big variable. When I first started reaching out to traditional corporate organizations with the way that I work, it isn't impossible, but it definitely adds a lot of steps to moving that person from a prospect to the next stage if they're unfamiliar or unaware or untrustworthy of the idea of working in the gift. So trying to reach out to people and organizations that are already sort of there and aligned with your point of view can be a great help. For me, I like working with sole proprietors and nonprofit organizations. I feel like they tend to be the most flexible and open-minded in the way that they want to work, and working in a gift is very appealing to them. So those are my starting points. And once I do that, I can look at, sort of start to formulate an idea of what that perfect client looks like, and then back it up in my head to the top of the sales process and say, okay, if this is my perfect client, then how do I find them to load them into the funnel so I can start the process? And that comes into creating the concept of a business plan. And I'm not talking about like a full-blown small business association, huge book of a business plan. I'm just talking about saying, if these are the type of clients that are going to end up supporting you at the end, and you've identified them, then how are you going to reach out to them to put them into the funnel? So if I like working with small businesses and nonprofits, then it makes sense for me to start to compile a list of nonprofits and small businesses that I feel like I can reach out to. Whether or not I get to them in any given month, depending on my workflow, it's important to have that list compiled so that when I need to start filling the funnel up again, I can just go back to that list, start reaching out to them, and starting the process from there. So another way you can even dial that down even more is to create, and sorry for the business speak, but to create vertical markets from there as well. So in the corporate world, a vertical market is sort of like a niche. So if I like helping independent professionals, then vertical market in that group for me might be therapists, might be dentists, might be lawyers. And for the way that I'm working, a lot of those form organically. So I started working with a lot of therapists a year ago, and it seems I have a constant stream of therapists that are coming to me based on referrals and some workshop work that I've done. So in a traditional sense, that's a vertical because I've gained a lot of experience working in that industry, and I can offer my gift in that industry a lot more efficiently than I can in one that I've never worked in before. Not that I can't take on a new industry, and verticals are not limiting, but they tend to be areas where I can offer the most examples of work that's appealing to that client, to say, I've helped a lot of people who do what you do, and here you can see their sites. It also helps me to know what that client needs, at least from a starting point, a lot more efficiently than a new business that I've never worked with before. So identifying those verticals can be great for you to sort of see when you need to add people and organizations to the top of the funnel, where are the best places to start. So if you've identified, hey, I've done a lot of work with therapists, I haven't done any work with independent lawyers, then maybe this month, if I need to add more prospects to the top of the funnel, I'm going to reach out to more therapists because I can make that happen faster. And again, it comes back to efficiency and everything else. So when you've done all of this work and you start to do your business plan, now you can sort of project out to the future and say, okay, how many prospects do I have right now? How many people do I have at the top of the funnel? If I go back to my CRM and look at where everybody is staged and pull those reports out to see what is the percentage of people that go from phone call schedule to once a proposal, or from once a proposal to project approved. What are those percentages? And look at how many people you have in that line. You can sort of do the math and project out, okay, well, now I can sort of get a rough idea of what June is going to look like for me, or July or August. Not so much in regards to how the cash flow is going to go, because again, you're working in the gift, so that's the ultimate variable, but at least into how much work you're going to be doing. And for me, as long as I have a consistent amount of work going on, then I have faith that the gifts will come and help support me however I need. So the goal for me is to keep busy, is to keep the work coming in, and when I do planning, it's to make sure that I have enough work over the period of time that I need to plan for. And if I don't, to be aware of that as soon as possible and to start taking action to bring people into the top of the funnel. So you can look at now on a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day period, or even over 12 months, how many people do I have in my sales cycle, at what stages, and if you do nothing else from this point forward, when will it dry up? When will you run out of prospects that will turn into clients? And at that point, you need to look at what plans do you have to fill things up at that point. And that's where your business plan can come in and say, okay, you've identified the vertical markets, you've identified the clients you like to work with, you've identified that 4 months from now you're going to run out of prospects, or 3 months or 30 days or whatever it is. So now you know when you're going to need to add people, and you know the type of people that you need to add to the top of the funnel. So now you have to get after it. You have to find whatever tools you're using to reach out to those people and engage with them, and identify how many of them you can kind of bring to the top of the funnel and where. So for me, I end up with spreadsheets and different reports that I can look at and say to both myself and the team, it looks like we have enough work definitely for this month and next month and into June. We're going to start to trail off if we don't do anything in July. So these are the things that I'm going to do to add more prospects into the top of the funnel, so that July and August and September we can all stay busy and keep giving our gift out. So that's an important part. And when you do that process and you end up with those spreadsheets, now you have a long-term vision of how your business is going to be. So you can look at it and say, all right, for the rest of this year, it looks like I can probably keep busy consistently, and project out what that means for you on average as far as gifts and things like that to keep the lights on. And it comes back to the whole process is now a little more visible and transparent to you, so you can look at the year as much as you can like a traditional business and say, all right, looks like we're going to have a pretty good year as long as we keep doing these things, as long as we keep busy, and as long as I keep adding people to the top of the funnel here, and as long as the people that I add to the funnel there are people that I've gone through the process and mitigated the risk as best as I can. So that sort of wraps everything all up together. Those are the 3 things that I wanted to cover today. I'm gonna bounce over now and take a look at any questions that were submitted, and if anybody has any questions, there's a spot right on the form where you can type them in, and I'm going to go through now as best I can. I apologize for not having somebody that can kind of read through these for me. So let me take a look here. So one question from Sam is, how do you manage employees or contractors who are still on the old economy? That's a great question. The question for me is with employees or vendors that are in the traditional economy. You really have to, particularly with vendors, you have to meet them where they are. It's really impossible to ask ask Verizon or Xfinity or Site5 or FreshBooks to work with you in a gift space. At least it is today. So that comes back to the need to have your planning and to have everything kind of set up, and the 3-month cushion I think is great. For employees working in the gift, that's something that we've spent a lot of time on. I now have a team of about 8 people. 5 I think are here in Philadelphia with me. 1 is in Sweden, 1's in Germany, and 1's in Brazil, who are all working with me now to build these projects, and we're all going to work in the gift. And we're trying to figure out ways to do that. And I promise you, once we've gone through a couple months with the plans we have now, I'll definitely share all of that. I don't want to share what we're doing yet because I'm still not 100% that it's going to work. We've been working on it a bit, and I think we have a good plan now that we're rolling into. And we'll see how it looks a couple months down the road. But it's definitely an interesting issue in that, how do you handle your own employees when you work in the gift? I think you have to stay as pure to your principles as you can, and to rely on the clients to gift back to you or the organization whatever seems fair to them, and then have employees, quote unquote, working with you who are willing to live that way as well. I don't even like to call them employees because I'm not issuing payroll. I'm not binding anybody to work with me. I have a team of 8 people that are all gifting their time to help build awesome websites. So they're doing that as a gift, and they're doing that in faith and trust that clients will gift back to the organization whatever seems fair to them, and that I will gift to them whatever seems fair from me for the time that they've spent. So definitely a lot of variables there, and a lot of different ways to skin that cat. But that is really the best way that I've come up with now. And again, I will share more when we get that, and I anticipate that being a entire hangout session here where we can kind of go through what is working and what didn't work. So stand by for that. Let me grab a couple more questions here, and then we'll wrap up. So I was trying to be a little faster this week. I'm not sure if we accomplished that. So James wants to know, what's the best thing about no longer working in the corporate 9 to 5 world? That's a great question. There are great things and there are not so great things. Working in a 9 to 5 world has a lot of consistency, a lot of stability, or at least perceived stability, where you know where you're going and you know what you're doing. And a lot of the things that I cover today, you don't have to worry about. There's an accounting department that's doing the budgeting. There's a business development department that's doing all the sales forecasting and coming up with the target markets and things like that, and the verticals. And there's a marketing department that is reaching out to them to get people into the top of the funnel. So a lot of those things are being taken care of, and you can just go do your thing. So you can show up, the lights are on almost magically, because honestly most employees don't give a lot of thought to how that occurs. You're sitting down at your desk or your cubicle, and you have a computer, and the software that you need is there, and the internet's working, and the phone is at your desk, and it's ringing, and business is great. So in some ways that's pretty easy. The flip side of that is, and what I find most beneficial for not being in that space, is I like to work for myself. I like to know where all of those expenses are, what is required, and how any revenue or gifts that my business is bringing in are being spent. So it's really important to me that the trust factor exists when a client gives me a gift, that I'm using that gift as wisely and judiciously as I can. So I really enjoy that part of the process, to making sure that I'm being as careful and almost like a steward of the gift that is given to me, that I can make sure that it's being applied out in the world the best possible way. And you definitely don't have that type of control when you're working for a 9 to 5 organization. That was one of the things that really pulled me away from working in a 9 to 5 organization. The other big variable, the other big benefit is being able to work with clients when it makes sense for clients. So breaking that arbitrary 9 to 5 window, and working in a way that makes sense with your life, working in a way that makes sense for your family and friends. A Saturday isn't necessarily any different to me than a Tuesday. What is important to me is that I'm making commitments to clients, and I'm doing my best to keep those commitments. And if it means I'm working at midnight because I wanted to do something with the family all day long, then so be it. That's my control. There's a great concept out there called results only work environment, ROWE. I think its environment is the E, and it basically is based on the principle of changing the way organizations and companies work to suggest and to say that what's most important is that an employee does the things that they're required to do and does them on time, and it doesn't really matter when they do it or where they do it. So in a row workplace, you're giving your tasks, and then you set forth. You can do them in the office, you can do them at home, you can do them at night, you can do them during the day. This type of work really appeals to me a lot. There's a lot of you know of a product called Gore-Tex. Well, Gore has invented a way of working that's been very successful for them for a while. And I am friends with a business consultant who helps businesses to work this way. So the main concept is you can do whatever you want, and I'm paraphrasing this. I'm not an expert in Gore or the way that they work, but you can basically do whatever you want as long as you do the things that you commit to do, and you do them in the time that they're required to do. And then the team sort of evaluates each other and decides, who did well and who didn't. And using this in a workplace is very appealing to me as well. And I hope to have that business consultant on, if he's watching here, in the next couple of weeks, so we can talk a little bit more about that. So I think for me, getting out of the 9 to 5 space is really great, because I really enjoy having that freedom and flexibility to prioritize my life. And then the last thing I want to add on that is when you're dealing with clients and organizations that live in that 9 to 5 world, though, it does sort of dictate to you when your work is. So as much as you want to be working for yourself and you want to be in a row space, or you want to emulate the way Gore works, that's all great. But if the clients you need to talk to and deal with are sitting in their offices from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, then that's when you need to be available, both to reach out to them on the sales cycle, and also to bring them in when you need to support them and show them the work and do everything else. So I do end up doing most of my work from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You can make changes as need be. I guess the short answer to the long version is what I like best is having the flexibility to kind of control that. So I'm going to wrap up here because we're right at about an hour, and I apologize if I didn't get to your questions. I'm going to do my best this week to kind of go through the rest and answer them, at least in email, or bring them in to talk about in the next Google Hangout. I'm looking to do this again in about 2 weeks. I'm not sure if it'll be part 2 of pitfalls and problems. I'm also looking at bringing on a panel discussion of people who are working in not only the gift economy but in alternate economies, pay what you will economies, free stores, things like that. I'd like to have a discussion about different flavors of the alternate economies that are out there, and I'd also like to bring in and have some discussion, for instance, with the gentleman that I was describing, who's the business consultant representing the way that Gore works. So these are the things I'd like to do in the future. Stay tuned. I'll reach out to you. Definitely 2 weeks from today, we'll be back on. The subject matter I'll figure out this week, and I'll let you know from there. If you need to take a look at this on the back end, it'll be on my YouTube channel, and it'll be on my website as well. So cool. Thanks a lot for your time, and I'll see you around. Thanks.